Okay, so step number one when it comes to drawing any portrait is that we need to draw our Loomis head. We're going to start with a circle. It's important to note here that your circle does not have to be perfect so long as its height is relative to its width. But if you need to, you can use a compass. When it comes to placing the oval, when you're looking at your reference photo, you need to roughly gauge where that oval sits with this in mind, that the top of the oval, wherever you put it on the paper, it's going to fall in line relative to the hairline of your subject, and then the bottom of the oval is going to fall roughly in line with where the bottom of the nose sits. So once we have that, we're going to draw in our vertical axis, our horizontal axis. Then we're going to extend the hairline from the top of the oval over. We're going to extend the horizontal axis, which is the brow line, over. We're going to extend the bottom of the oval, which is the bottom of the nose, over. We're then going to place our center line, which is the center of the face. We're going to extend down our vertical axis line, and then we're going to pull that over and connect that to the bottom of the center line. Then on the other side, we're just going to pull that line up, and that finishes off the far side of the face. We're going to take our eraser, and we're just going to erase this bit of the initial circle. And then in the bottom third section of the face, we want to place anchor points. So the first anchor point is roughly where the top of the upper lip is going to sit. The bottom anchor point is roughly where the bottom of the lower lip will sit. Okay. Now, once we have this, we're going to place the cheek plane of our subject here. And that pretty much finishes the Loomis head. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to give our drawing a collar and a neck so that it's not just a floating head out here in space. And I'm just doing short, quick little pulls, okay? I'm using the Loomis method and the width of the neck to kind of gauge exactly how big this collar needs to be, okay? And that's the beautiful thing about sketching this way is once you have that Loomis head established, you can use that Loomis head as a gauge for how big and broad your shoulders need to be, how big that collar needs to be, whether the subject is wearing a shirt or a jacket or a suit, let's say. Same thing. It's the same principle as to why we start every single portrait with the ear. Okay, so now take a kneaded eraser and go ahead and hit your Loomis head. And don't erase it completely. Make it to where it's more or less transparent, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to start with the ear. Now, it's important to note here that the ear is always placed, if you follow the Loomis method this way, in the bottom rear quadrant of the oval. And when I say rear, of course, I mean rear to the front of the face, right? But notice the technique that I'm using. I'm sketching the outer edge of the ear. I'm doing nice, short pulls. I'm using a light to mid pressure control here. For you, especially if you're following along and this maybe is some of your first portraits that you've ever done, I would highly encourage you to use a very light pressure control. That way, if you need to go back through and erase and make any adjustments, you can, and you're not going to worry about scratching your paper. And then I'm just going to extend the jaw line down here a little bit. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to solidify the back of the neck here, especially now that I have the ear drawn in. Okay, so now that we have the ear drawn, you're going to want to use this as a gauge so that you can sketch in your hair and nail the proportions, okay? So the back of his head is actually right here. So we're just going to pull fairly straight up. Just kind of up, and then right around here, we're going to start pulling this over. And what I'm doing is while I'm drawing this and I'm looking at the reference, I'm actually looking at my Loomis head as well. And I'm using that hairline that's coming off the top of the oval and around the front face of the Loomis head. I'm using that as a gauge for how far back the back of the headline needs to go. And right here, I'm building up the bangs, right? Because if you look at the Loomis head, obviously every head shape is going to be different. And this is one of the reasons why the Loomis head, albeit is a wonderful method to use, you cannot rely on it solely for your proportions, especially when it comes to head shape. With facial features, more or less, yes. Almost every time you'll be fine. But I mean, this is a prime example of a reference photo where their head is many things, but it is a completely different shape from the Loomis head. You can clearly see it on paper, okay? Now what we're going to do is we have the outer shape of the subject's hair defined. And what this is what I call bringing out the different segments of hair, okay? If you look at the reference photo, you can clearly see there's different clumps and groupings of hair flowing in a certain direction. This is what we're bringing out here in our sketch, as we are identifying those segments of hair. Now, what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm carving out the outer edge of the subject's face. And I like to establish the outer edge of the face first, especially when it comes to like 3/4 turn angles, such as this, because it helps me place the features later on in the drawing. But I'm just going to establish the basic shape of the jaw as well. And now we're going to switch it up. We're going to switch from the Loomis method to the Asaro method here. And the first thing that we want to establish is the nose bridge plane. So we're going to draw a horizontal line, and then we're going to draw in 2 vertical lines slightly going away from each other. Now it's important to understand here that the corner of these vertical lines is going to be where the basic shape of your subject's eyebrow begins. And this is true on both sides. So we have the first eyebrow drawn in, and now we're going to plug in the second eyebrow. The subject here has fairly thin eyebrows, so shouldn't be too much effort. But now, next step, once we have those eyebrows drawn in, is we are going to frame the eyes. These are called frame lines. We're going to pull down this temple plane. Look at the Asaro head. You can clearly see what I'm bringing out here. The temple plane always falls in line with the second frame line, and then the third frame line stems off the corner of the eyebrow. Once you have the eyes framed, you then connect those frame lines, and it starts to bring out the top of your subject's eye. And then just like this, you can establish the tear duct if you want, and then pull that line back, and then extend it down from the corner. Just like this. It's a very simple approach. And then we're going to do the exact same thing for the other side. I got my first frame. The second frame line is kind of hard to see because it's right on the edge, but it's there. And then we're just going to pull this line back, and we're going to connect it. And that's pretty much our subject's eyes. And while we're here, let's put in the iris. Why not? Let's just establish that. And the pupil. Give it a little bit more character with the pupil. And that's pretty much it for the eyes as far as its basic shape, okay? So now the nose. Notice, we're going to start our nose from the nose line of the underlying transparent Loomis head, right? We're using that as a guide. So the first things first is that we want to draw in the bottom plane of the subject's nose. If you need help with this step, refer to the Asaro head model. It's there for a reason. So we're bringing this over just like this. This is the bottom plane. And then once we have the bottom plane drawn in, let's just punch in the nostril. Why not? We have the tip of the nose, so we're going to draw on the line for that. And then this line right here, we're going to extend this all the way up. This plugs in to the nose bridge plane. And this, with the second line right here, is showcasing the ridge plane. There's 2 different planes. There's the nose bridge, which is in between the eyes, and then there's the nose ridge, which is the top of the nose, and it extends all the way down to the tip of the nose. And then right here, this side plane here, this is what is called the slope plane. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. It is the slope plane. It is the plane that slopes off of the ridge of the nose. And that's pretty much that. Very simple. And of course, the more you draw this way, this will become second nature for you. You just got to keep going. And then right here, I'm just going to put in these very light bags that the reference has under their eyes. Yeah, something like that. You guys know me, I can never say no to character. The more character a drawing has, the better. So now we're going to draw these two parallel lines angled slightly away from each other, and these are to signify the philtrum. This is the philtrum plane. The philtrum plugs into the Cupid's bow, which is the top center of the upper lip, and it forms pretty much the top of a heart, which is why they call it the Cupid's bow. We're then going to identify the corners of the mouth, and then we're going to extend a line from the corner of the mouth up to the Cupid's bow. And this will single-handedly bring out our upper lip. We're then going to bring out the lower lip here. And a good best practice is don't connect that lower lip all the way to the corner of the mouth. All right. And then there's some drop shadows here. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of sketch those in and bring those out for our subject. And then I'm just going to clean this up a little bit with an eraser. But yeah, I'm really liking the way that's looking. These proportions are pretty good. And then right here, I'm just going to punch in the Asaro planes. If you remember, the Asaro lips have 2 planes for the top lip, and then 3 planes that comprise the bottom lip. And now what we're going to do, we're going to refer to our Asaro head model, and these lines right here, these are the Asaro facial planes. It's important to get familiar with these planes and start to sketch them into your portrait sketches, because they are there to help you begin to understand the underlying form of the human face. These planes are always going to be the same across different subjects. However, the proportions that you deal with will be slightly different, but principally they're the same. And so the only question then, whenever you're drawing anything, is, well, what's the actual proportion of this plane to another one or to another feature? But just like this, we're just bringing this up. We're going to extend this plane all the way back above the ear. If you need help identifying exactly where these planes go, use the Asaro head model reference right there. That's why I've provided it for you guys. But as far as the Asaro planes go, you can add as many or as little of them as you wish. The whole point is that they are meant to help you understand that underlying form. So if you're a little bit more developed of an artist, maybe you understand exactly how to shade a human face. You don't necessarily need these. However, if you're on the other end of the spectrum and you are a novice, let's say, and you're just beginning, they're a really good framework that you can use that's rooted in principle and will help you be successful no matter who it is that you're drawing. So now, what I'm doing is I'm just going through and I'm adding slightly more definition, but I'm doing it through my line work, okay? So when it comes to line work, there's a couple different definitions that are very basic that you should definitely keep in the back of your mind. The first definition is a line's quality. So line quality is the relative thinness or the thickness of a line. And then there's line weight. Now, line weight and line quality tend to have a correlation with each other. The weight of a line is essentially its saturation. It is the relative darkness or the lightness of that specific line. Now, when a line is thicker, it tends to have, but not all the time, a darker, heavier weight to it, right? More saturation. Where a really thin line, most of the time, but not always, tends to have a lighter saturation, okay? But then here I'm just punching in these eyebrows. Notice the direction that I'm pulling, right? I always say every stroke means something, so be intentional with every stroke that you do. Have fun, but be intentional. as time goes on, I'm going to be coming out with more and more extreme angles. If you guys want to, definitely help give me some guidance and comment and let me know, hey, like, could you do like this angle, could you do that angle, and that'll kind of help me curate the right types of videos for you guys. That's pretty much it. Stay happy, stay healthy, and remember, never stop drawing.